The night London changed forever began like any other, cold, thick with fog, and scented faintly of iron and smoke. Gas lamps lined the streets like pale ghosts, flickering against the drizzle, their dim glow unable to cut through the blackness that had settled over the city. The Thames moved sluggishly, heavy with mist, as if even the river hesitated to flow under such an oppressive sky. In an attic room on the edge of Whitechapel, Dr. Jonathan Harrow stared out of his cracked window at the faint outline of the moon. His candle had burned down to a trembling stub, and yet he did not move. The night felt wrong, he could sense it deep in his bones, a hum of unease pulsing through the marrow. He had been having the dreams again. The same ones that plagued his mind since the expedition in the Carpathian Mountains 3 months ago. A castle in ruins. A shadow on the stairs. A voice whispering his name, stretching it like silk across the dark, Jonathan. He rubbed his temples, trying to dismiss the sound that seemed to echo still. But then, faintly, from the street below, came the rhythmic tap of footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Confident. Someone was walking the streets at this hour, but that wasn't unusual. What was strange was how those steps seemed to stop directly beneath his window, and stay there. Jonathan's hand trembled as he reached for the curtain, hesitating before pulling it aside. A figure stood in the street, tall and motionless, cloaked in black so deep it seemed to drink the light around it. The fog parted faintly, revealing the face beneath, a pale, almost luminous visage, the features sharp, regal, timeless. The man's eyes lifted, meeting Jonathan's. And Jonathan froze. Those eyes, crimson, aglow with unnatural hunger, held him captive. A slow smile curved the stranger's lips, revealing the faintest trace of fangs. Jonathan stumbled back, gasping for air, his chest heaving as if all the air in the room had vanished. He could feel something crawling beneath his skin, a sense of being watched, touched by something ancient and patient. The candle died. The room plunged into darkness. And then came the voice. Smooth, cultured, with an accent that twisted through the shadows like smoke. Good evening, Dr. Harrow. You left something of mine in Transylvania. Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs. He couldn't speak. Couldn't move. His throat burned with the effort of breath. He turned, slowly, to the door. It was closed. The latch still locked. Yet the air had changed. The room was colder. He wasn't alone anymore. From the corner of the attic, the shadows seemed to thicken, dark threads spinning together into a shape, a human form. Slowly, impossibly, it emerged from the darkness, unfolding into the same figure from the street below. The man smiled again, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light filtering through the fogged window. I am grateful, the stranger whispered, his voice intimate and terrible. Your expedition woke me from centuries of slumber. And for that, Jonathan Harrow, I owe you eternity. Jonathan backed away, shaking his head. You can't be real. The stranger stepped closer, the faint click of his boots echoing softly across the wooden floor. Oh, but I am. I am more than real. I am the truth that your kind has forgotten. The night that never ends. He bowed his head slightly, almost courteously. Count Dracula, at your service. Jonathan screamed as the shadows surged around him. A rush of cold wind extinguished the last light, and for a moment, the attic dissolved into nothingness. When the wind stilled, only silence remained. The following morning, a young constable found the door splintered from within. The bed untouched. The walls stained with something dark and viscous. Of Jonathan Harrow, there was no trace, save for a smear of blood leading to the window, and a faint whisper carried by the fog. Eternal night has begun. That evening, reports spread through London of strange occurrences, animals found drained and lifeless, people claiming to see a tall man dressed in black moving across the rooftops. The city, in its arrogance, dismissed it as hysteria. But deep beneath the gaslit glamour, beneath the carriages and music halls, something was stirring. A hunger centuries old had awakened. And somewhere in the heart of London, Count Dracula smiled as he watched the city pulse with life, and imagined the feast to come. The predator had returned. And this time, he would not hunt alone. London, 2 nights later. The fog was heavier now, as though the city itself were trying to smother something it could not comprehend. Beneath the flickering glow of the gas lamps, the carriages rolled past Westminster, their wheels whispering through puddles that reflected distorted faces. The air smelled of rain, smoke, and something faintly metallic. Lady Evelyn Whitmore stepped down from her carriage, clutching her velvet shawl tighter. She was late for the opera, though that hardly mattered, her mind wasn't on music. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen that morning. A man, pale as parchment, standing motionless in the fog outside her townhouse. His clothes looked centuries old, yet his eyes, they were alive. Burning. Watching. She'd blinked, and he was gone. Imagination, she whispered to herself. That's all it was. But as she entered the grand marble foyer of the theater, the same unease prickled the back of her neck. She glanced behind her, nothing but shadows and silhouettes of strangers. And yet she felt it again, that weight of being seen. Upstairs, the chandelier dimmed slightly, as if the light itself feared what lingered beyond its reach. The music began, violins weeping, the soprano's voice slicing through the air. But Evelyn barely heard it. She felt someone sitting beside her, though she was sure the seat had been empty a moment ago. Slowly, she turned her head. He was there. The same man. Pale, elegant. Eyes like garnets under moonlight. I beg your pardon, he said softly, his accent old world, foreign, like something preserved from another century. Forgive my intrusion, Lady Whitmore. I believe we have not been properly introduced. Evelyn's lips parted in shock. How do you know my name? He smiled faintly. Names are the keys to souls, my dear. And some souls shine brighter than others. Her pulse fluttered. She should have stood. She should have screamed. But something in his voice, low, melodic, hypnotic, anchored her in place. I am Count Dracula, he continued, bowing his head slightly. A traveler. A lover of art and beauty. Evelyn swallowed hard. His gaze burned into her, and for a moment, the theater seemed to dissolve. She felt as though she were floating, falling, somewhere far from London, into black mountains and endless night. When she blinked, she realized the performance had ended. The crowd was applauding. She hadn't noticed the passage of time. The Count rose, offering his gloved hand. May I escort you home? He asked, voice velvet and danger intertwined. Without thinking, she nodded. The carriage wheels echoed through the empty streets. She tried to speak, to ask him who he was, where he came from, but her mind was thick, fogged, lulled by his presence. He watched her quietly, the faintest smile curving his lips. You look troubled, Lady Whitmore. I have been dreaming, she whispered. A place I've never seen. Stone halls. Candles that never burn out. And a voice calling to me. His eyes gleamed. Ah. The call of memory. Perhaps your soul remembers what your mind has forgotten. He reached forward, brushing a strand of her hair from her cheek. His touch was cold, so cold that her skin tingled in its wake. Do you fear me? He asked gently. Evelyn wanted to say yes. She wanted to scream. But instead, her lips parted and the words that left her throat were soft, almost yearning. No. Dracula's smile deepened. Good. The carriage stopped before her townhouse. The fog swirled like smoke around them. He stepped out, helping her down, his gloved hand firm and cold in hers. I will see you again, he said, his gaze locking with hers. Sooner than you think. And then he was gone, dissolved into the mist like a dream fading before dawn. That night, Evelyn stood at her mirror long after midnight, staring at her reflection. Her pulse was racing, her breath shallow. She felt alive in a way she never had before, vibrant, trembling, electric. But as she tilted her head, she froze. Behind her reflection, in the darkness of the room, two red eyes glimmered faintly. She turned. Nothing. Only the silence of the London night. Yet, somewhere above, on a rooftop cloaked in shadow, Count Dracula watched her window, lips parting slightly as the hunger burned within him. The centuries of sleep had only sharpened his craving. He whispered to the wind, his voice low and fevered. "Soon, my sweet. The city will be ours." And beneath that whisper, in the farthest corners of London, other shadows stirred. The eternal night was spreading. London had grown restless. The fog no longer simply hung, it breathed. The city's pulse was uneven, as if something beneath the cobblestones stirred with a life of its own. Newspapers whispered of disappearances. Dogs howled at unseen things. And those who walked alone after midnight swore the air itself felt alive, as though eyes were hidden in every shadow. Lady Evelyn Whitmore hadn't left her home in 3 days. Curtains drawn, mirrors covered, she lingered in her bedchamber as though afraid of the daylight. Servants whispered about her, how pale she looked, how faint she had become. But none dared question her when she dismissed them all before sundown. At twilight, she sat before her mirror, hands trembling. Her reflection seemed wrong. Too white, too delicate, her lips too red. The faintest pulse fluttered in her throat. And then, she heard it again. That voice. Evelyn. Soft. Intimate. Ancient. She turned slowly. The candlelight flickered, and he was there. Count Dracula stood in the corner, tall, silent, a figure sculpted from darkness itself. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim room, and the air around him seemed to bend with his presence. "You should not be here," she whispered, though her voice betrayed no conviction. "Should," he echoed, stepping closer. "My dear, what is should to creatures like us?" Her heart thudded violently. "Creatures like us?" He smiled, a slow, deliberate curve that revealed just the hint of something terrible beneath. "You already feel it, do you not? The pull, the hunger." Evelyn's lips parted. A dizzying warmth washed through her body, followed by cold that seeped into her bones. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. What are you doing to me?" He reached her then, gloved hand sliding gently beneath her chin, tilting her face upward. "I am showing you what you were meant to become." Her breath shuddered. His other hand rested lightly on her shoulder. The scent of him, ancient stone, storm air, and faint traces of death, filled her senses. "You took something from me that night," she whispered. "My will." He leaned closer, his breath cold against her ear. "No. I gave you freedom. From time. From decay. From the lie of mortality." Her reflection wavered in the mirror behind them, his form casting no image. And then he bent his head. For an instant, the world went utterly still. Then came the sharp, wet sound of fangs breaking skin. Evelyn gasped, arching backward as pain and pleasure surged together in one unbearable current. Dracula's lips pressed against her throat, drinking deeply, slowly, reverently. The room swam in crimson shadow. Her fingers clutched at his coat, not in resistance, but surrender. The candle flickered wildly, then died. When it was over, the room was silent but for her ragged breathing. He drew back, his mouth stained with her blood. Eyes blazing with unholy satisfaction. Evelyn swayed in his arms, her skin pale as marble, her pulse faint but persistent. Dracula studied her for a moment, then pressed his wrist to her lips. "Drink," he commanded softly. She hesitated, only for a moment, before obeying. His blood was fire. Her body convulsed as it slid down her throat, her veins alight with black ecstasy. When she opened her eyes again, the world had changed. The colors sharper. The sounds clearer. And in the mirror, her reflection was gone. Dracula smiled. Now you see, my beloved. The night welcomes you. Evelyn trembled, tears glistening in her eyes. What have you done to me? He cupped her cheek, his expression unreadable. I have made you eternal. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The first true storm of winter broke, rain lashing the glass in furious rhythm. Evelyn's laughter echoed softly through the room, fragile, broken, half sane. Down in the streets below, a beggar wandered through the rain, muttering prayers. When he looked up, he saw movement at Evelyn's window, a shape leaning outward, eyes burning red. By dawn, the beggar's body was found in an alley, throat torn open, his face locked in terror. Scotland Yard dismissed it as animal attack. But behind closed doors, Dr. Seward of the lunatic asylum began keeping new notes, records of patients dreaming of crimson eyes, of a pale man walking the rooftops, of whispers saying, "He is here again." The Count had returned not only to feed, but to multiply. London's veins were opening. And the first taste was only the beginning. London had begun to change. Slowly, quietly, like a sickness that hid its symptoms until too late. The nights grew longer, colder, crueler. The fog no longer smelled of rain but of rot. Horses refused to pass certain streets after dark. Whole rows of gas lamps flickered out without reason. And yet, the city continued to dance, oblivious, under its veil of smoke and music. At the heart of it all, in a mansion overlooking the river, Lady Evelyn Whitmore hosted a grand gathering. Her sudden return to society after weeks of seclusion stirred both curiosity and gossip. Rumor said she had fallen ill, rumor said she had gone mad. But when she appeared at her party that night, radiant, glowing, breathtaking, every whisper died. Her skin gleamed like moonlight. Her eyes, once soft blue, now shimmered with something deeper, almost metallic. Her laughter filled the hall, melodic but strange, carrying a chill that made people shiver without knowing why. Dr. John Seward, present as a guest, watched her from across the ballroom. He had known Evelyn since childhood. And something inside him whispered that this was not her. "Lady Whitmore," he said when she finally approached. "It's remarkable to see you well again." She smiled, showing the faintest hint of teeth too sharp to be natural. "Dr. Seward," she said, her voice honey over ice. "It's remarkable how quickly people recover when given the proper influence." He frowned. "You look different." "Do I?" she asked, tilting her head. The chandelier light caught her eyes, red for a second, then gone. "Perhaps I simply see things more clearly now." Before he could respond, the orchestra's music shifted. The air in the ballroom thickened. Guests turned their heads toward the grand entrance as a tall man entered, dressed in black, his coat long, his face as pale as marble. Count Dracula. He moved through the crowd like smoke, unseen yet felt by every soul in the room. Conversations faltered. The music trembled. Some instinct buried deep within each guest seemed to recognize the predator in their midst. Evelyn's gaze softened as he approached. "Count," she said, her tone reverent. "Lady Whitmore," he replied, his accent curling through the air like a dark spell. "You shine tonight. The night itself envies you." He turned to Dr. Seward, who stood rigid, his hand tightening around his glass. "And you are?" "Seward. John Seward. Physician." Dracula smiled faintly, and in that moment, Seward felt something cold slither through his mind, a presence brushing against his thoughts, testing their strength. "Ah," Dracula murmured. "A man of science. How comforting. Tell me, doctor, do you still believe all things can be explained by reason?" Seward met his gaze, and instantly regretted it. The world blurred. His heart pounded. For an instant, he saw not the ballroom but a great hall of stone, candles burning in skulls, a sea of shadows writhing like living smoke. He heard whispers, not words, but hunger-given sound. He blinked, and it was gone. "I believe," he stammered, "that reason is what separates us from madness." Dracula's smile deepened. "And yet," he said softly, "madness is often the first step toward truth." As the night went on, guests seemed drawn to Dracula like moths to a flame. His laughter, smooth and deep, spread like perfume. He danced, he spoke, he charmed. Women leaned closer. Men tried to imitate him. No one noticed how pale they became, how their lips darkened, how their energy faded by the hour. By midnight, the ballroom's lights dimmed as the storm outside broke. Lightning slashed the sky, illuminating faces that now looked waxen and hollow. The music faltered again, strings snapping without touch. Then, for a brief second, the lights went out. And in that darkness, the guests heard something soft and wet, a sound like lips against flesh, followed by a sigh. When the chandeliers flared again, Evelyn stood in the center of the floor, a streak of crimson glistening on her neck. Dracula stood behind her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The crowd gasped, half in horror, half in awe. But he only smiled. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Fear is for the living." A woman fainted. Another screamed. But no one left. Not one person ran. It was as if the air itself held them in place. When the storm finally subsided and dawn crept in, the mansion was silent. Servants entered hours later to find the guests gone, the windows open, and blood trailing across the floor in faint, elegant arcs, as though dozens of people had been led into the fog willingly. From the rooftops above London, Dracula watched the sunrise smothered by clouds. Evelyn stood beside him, her eyes hollow and beautiful. "It begins," he murmured. And beneath the city, the crypts, the tunnels, the sewers, new voices began to whisper. London was not dying. It was changing. By the first week of November, London had begun to rot from the inside out. The sickness was spreading, quietly, elegantly, through parlors, drawing rooms, and theaters. The city still smiled, still danced beneath chandeliers and perfume, but its eyes were hollow. Its laughter, forced. Its nights, too long. Dr. John Seward saw it first in the hospitals. Pale patients arrived by the dozens, drained of strength, their pulses faint, their throats marked with strange bruises that looked like the kiss of a flame. The doctors called it blood fever. The priests called it sin made flesh. Seward knew better. He sat at his desk in the asylum late one night, the lamplight trembling across his notes. He had drawn the marks several times, the two small punctures always in the same place, always deep, clean, precise. No blade could make them. No animal bite matched. He rubbed his eyes. In the corner of his office, a patient began to hum, soft, tuneless, eerie. "Silas," he said, glancing up. "It's past lights out." The man continued humming, swaying slightly in his restraints. His lips moved. Words slipped out, fragmented, trembling. "Red, the city is red now, they walk in the dark, they sing with their teeth." Seward's pen froze. "What did you say?" The patient began to laugh, a deep, rasping sound that echoed through the halls. "The blood choir, they sing beneath the streets." That night, Seward couldn't sleep. His mind circled that phrase, the blood choir. He'd heard whispers of it before, men disappearing near the crypts of St. Jude's, strange chanting under the river bridges, the sound of voices when the fog was thickest. He needed proof. The next evening, armed with a lantern and a revolver, Seward descended into the catacombs beneath the old city. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with damp and decay. The tunnels twisted, ancient bricks slick with moss and something darker. He followed the faint sound of movement, a rhythm like distant breathing. And then he heard it. Voices. Low. Melodic. Dozens of them. Singing in perfect, terrible harmony. Seward crept closer, the beam of his lantern shaking. He emerged into a vast chamber, a forgotten chapel carved deep beneath London streets. Candles flickered in skulls. The air was thick with the scent of blood and incense. And there, at the altar, stood her. Lady Evelyn Whitmore. Her gown was crimson silk, glistening as though woven from fresh veins. Around her, figures knelt in prayer, men and women of London's highest circles, their faces pale and serene. Their lips moved together, chanting words that clawed at Seward's sanity. From the darkness above, a presence descended. The temperature dropped. The candles bent in the same direction, as though bowing to something unseen. Dracula stepped forward. Tonight, the Count said softly, London sings its first hymn of eternity. Evelyn turned her face toward him, her lips parting. We are ready, my lord. Then begin. She reached for the nearest devotee, a nobleman Seward recognized as Lord Pembroke, and drew him close. Without hesitation, she bit deep into his throat. The others followed, sinking their teeth into one another in grotesque ecstasy. The sound was unbearable, sucking, moaning, the rhythm of feasting. The blood choir. Seward staggered back, his hand over his mouth. His lantern clattered to the floor, shattering. Light spilled wildly across the chamber. Dracula's head snapped up. His eyes met Seward's across the darkness, two coals burning through time itself. So, he murmured, voice carrying like thunder, the man of science seeks proof. Seward fired his revolver. The shot echoed like a scream. The bullet tore through the Count's chest, then stopped, crumbled to ash, and fell to the floor. Dracula smiled. Now you have it. The choir turned toward Seward, their mouths glistening red, their eyes empty. They began to move forward, slowly, hungrily, chanting still as they came. Seward turned and ran, through the tunnels, up the winding stairs, bursting out into the cold night air. He didn't stop until he reached his carriage, gasping, shaking, soaked in sweat and terror. Behind him, deep beneath the city, the singing continued. The blood choir had been born. And above ground, the infection spread faster than ever. By dawn, 5 more bodies would be found drained in the alleys. By week's end, Parliament itself would whisper of a plague. But what none of them knew, what only Seward now understood, was that the plague was not disease. It was rebirth. The night was no longer coming. It was already here. The city was dying. No, not dying, transforming. By the second week of November, the fog that had once been a comfort to Londoners became a living thing. It slithered through alleys, veiling screams and the sound of footsteps that never belonged to men. In the daylight, the streets looked empty, abandoned. But when dusk fell, doors were bolted, windows nailed shut, and prayers whispered to gods that no longer listened. Dr. John Seward hadn't slept in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling from exhaustion and fear. His once orderly asylum had become a fortress, its iron gates chained shut, its halls filled with flickering lamps and trembling survivors. He had seen too much. The blood choir's song still haunted him, their voices chanting beneath the city, promising salvation through damnation. He knew now that Dracula's reach was no longer limited to the shadows. It had spread into Parliament, the courts, the churches. Power itself had been bitten. And humanity was losing. That night, as the wind screamed across the rooftops, Seward was startled by a sharp knock at the asylum's rear door. He raised his pistol, edging closer, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" "Someone who knows what hunts you," came a low voice. He unlatched the door, and found himself face to face with a woman cloaked in black, her eyes as cold and steady as the moon. She held a long wooden stake in one hand and a bundle of crosses in the other. "My name is Helena Van Helsing," she said. "You saw the choir, didn't you?" Seward blinked. You know about them?" "I know their master." Her gaze hardened. "And I've killed his kind before." She stepped inside, uninvited but unwelcome only to the shadows that shrank from her presence. She moved like someone who had walked through fire and learned to love the burn. "You were right to fear him," she said. "He isn't just a monster. He's a god in the making." Seward sank into his chair, running a shaking hand through his hair. "There's no stopping him. He's everywhere. Half the city answers to him now, willingly." "Then we burn the half that does," Helena said flatly. Seward stared. "You mean to kill them all?" "If we don't," she said, her tone icy, "then soon there'll be no one left to kill." For a long moment, only the wind howled outside. Then Seward nodded. "What do we need?" "Faith," she said. "And fire." By midnight, they were moving through the ruins of the city's lower wards. The fog clung thick around them, muffling their footsteps. The air stank of blood and soot. They carried lanterns dipped in holy oil, stakes carved from church pews, and a sack of silver bullets. At the mouth of an alley, they stopped. Bodies lay piled in the street, pale, hollow, their throats marked, their eyes open wide in terror. A child's doll floated in a puddle beside them, its porcelain face cracked. Helena touched the cross around her neck. "He's close," she murmured. Then came the whisper. It slithered through the fog like silk. "John." Seward froze. He knew that voice. It was Evelyn's. "Don't," Helena hissed, grabbing his arm. "It's not her anymore." But the voice came again, softer, pleading. "Please, John. I'm cold." He turned. Out of the mist stepped Lady Evelyn, her dress torn, her skin gleaming white as marble. Her eyes, red and infinite, fixed on his. "I didn't want this," she whispered, taking a step forward. "He made me, but you can save me." Seward trembled. "Evelyn." Helena fired. The bullet tore through Evelyn's chest, and she screamed, not in pain, but in rage. Her body convulsed, smoke pouring from the wound as her face twisted into something inhuman. Her fangs flashed. She lunged. Helena met her midair, driving the stake through her heart with a cry that split the night. Evelyn's scream echoed across the rooftops before she crumbled into ash. Seward fell to his knees, shaking. "God forgive us." Helena looked down at him. If God cared, he wouldn't have sent him. They reached the old church before dawn, a ruined cathedral that loomed like a corpse above the city. Inside, they found the silence of the grave. And on the altar, a single rose, black as coal. Helena touched it carefully. "He's been here," she said. "And he'll return." Seward stared up at the shattered stained glass, the light barely reaching through. "Then we wait." Helena nodded once. "We fight." From far below, beneath the stones, a sound began, low, rhythmic, building like thunder. The blood choir was waking again. The last light of London flickered behind them as they prepared their weapons. And in the shadows above the altar, unseen and smiling, Dracula whispered. "You can't kill the night." Dawn never came. The sky above London was a smothered wound, bleeding smoke instead of light. The city was silent but for the distant tolling of bells that no longer had priests to ring them. The fog was red now, thick, metallic, alive with whispers. Every street was an open grave. Every window, a watching eye. Dr. John Seward and Helena Van Helsing stood in the ruins of St. Augustine's Cathedral. Their lanterns burned weakly, the oil sputtering. The crucifixes they carried felt heavier with every breath. Below them, in the catacombs, the blood choir sang again, louder, deeper, 1,000 voices humming in devotion to their lord. "He's ready," Helena said, voice low. "This is the night he finishes it. He'll spread the darkness across the world." Seward's hands trembled as he loaded another silver bullet. "Then we stop him here." Helena looked at him, her face pale, her eyes fierce. "If we fail, the sun will never rise again." They descended into the catacombs. The air was thick, wet, filled with a hum that made their bones vibrate. The stone walls pulsed faintly, veins of red light crawling through them as though the earth itself had begun to bleed. Candles lined the passage, hundreds, thousands, each flame guttering in rhythm with the choir's song. The deeper they went, the louder it grew. The voices weren't merely singing anymore, they were weeping, moaning in ecstasy, begging for eternity. The tunnel opened into a vast underground hall. There, upon a throne carved from the skulls of kings, sat Count Dracula. He was no longer merely man, nor monster. His form shimmered, flesh and shadow intertwined, his eyes burning brighter than any sun. Around him, hundreds knelt, the blood choir, once men and women of London's highest blood, now pale husks swaying to his rhythm. Evelyn was among them, her beauty twisted into something angelic and obscene. Dracula rose, his movements fluid and inhuman. "So," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber like the tolling of a great bell. "The physician and the hunter come to end what they cannot understand." Helena stepped forward, raising her stake. "Your reign ends tonight." He smiled. "You speak of reigns as though I am a king. I am no ruler, child. I am deliverance." He spread his arms. Shadows erupted from the walls like wings. The choir fell silent. "You see only hunger," he said softly. "But I bring freedom, from fear, from time, from God's neglect. Look upon them, they are not dead. They are awake." Seward aimed his pistol, firing. The silver bullet hit Dracula square in the chest, and passed through as if he were smoke. Dracula's laughter filled the chamber. "You think light and faith will save you? Your God abandoned this place long before I returned." Helena charged. With a cry, she plunged the stake toward his heart, but his hand caught her wrist mid-swing. His grip was cold as the grave. "Ah," he whispered. "A Van Helsing. You reek of your father's failure." He lifted her effortlessly from the ground, her feet dangling. "He thought he killed me once. He merely taught me patience." Seward shouted, driving his cross into Dracula's back. The Count turned, the flesh around the wound hissing, his face twisting into something monstrous, eyes black, mouth splitting wide, fangs glistening like knives. "Enough," Dracula thundered. The candles extinguished all at once. Darkness swallowed everything. Seward heard Helena scream, then silence. He stumbled, firing wildly, the gun's flash revealing glimpses, Dracula's face inches from his own, the choir advancing, hands reaching. A whisper grazed his ear. "Join us, Doctor. You've already tasted the dark. Why deny what you were born to become?" Seward pressed the cross to his chest. "You'll never win." Dracula smiled. "I already have." He drove his hand into Seward's chest. The doctor gasped, choking on blood as the Count's shadow poured into him. The cross fell from his grasp. Helena, barely conscious, crawled toward the altar. Her fingers brushed a fallen torch. With her last strength, she hurled it toward the throne. The oil ignited, fire spreading across the hall like a living wave. Flames roared. The choir shrieked. Dracula stood amidst the inferno, unburned, radiant in its light. "Foolish woman," he said, voice low and terrible. "You've only hastened the dawn I promised." The fire reached the ceiling. The catacombs collapsed. Days later, London was gone. The survivors who fled into the countryside spoke of crimson smoke rising from the city, of screams carried on the wind, of figures walking calmly through the flames. And when night fell, the fog followed them. In the ruins of St. Augustine's, beneath the ash and rubble, a single figure rose from the dust, pale, regal, eyes gleaming red. Dracula. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun should have been, and smiled. "There is no dawn," he whispered. "Only me." And as the first screams echoed from the villages beyond, the eternal night began. London was gone. Humanity had fallen. And the age of blood had begun. The end.